Welcome to Dr. M Wadcast, a wadcast with a mission, connecting continuous improvement professionals across the world.
So what I did was I took the questions and I wrote answers to them because I think English is not everybody's first language. I tend to speak a little bit fast. Sorry. So I'd like to share with you the questions and answers. Is that okay? We can head to chapter 2 now. Dr. M,
Yes,
is that
sir.
all right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, let me see if the questions show up here. Okay, now why don't I see the questions? Hang on just a moment. I think I have to close some files and reopen them to make this happen. It's a little bit of an unusual thing sometime in Zoom that you have to open the PDF files when you're in Zoom, not before. So let's see what we have here. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, that looks good. Open that up. Let's go to full screen. Oops, this is in the way. How do we move this out of the way? Oh, okay. Where's view? Okay, actually, we probably want to do something better than that. Let's see if we can do full width. Oops. View. Okay, we'll just do this. All right, so you should be able to see the questions and answers. Is that correct? Yes?
It would be better if you can slightly zoom in.
Okay, how's that?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So the first question was, came from Dave Fitzpatrick. If your friend asks you for advice about organizing a 2-day in-house training session on Lean and TPS for middle management in his company, what elements would you tell him to incorporate in the training? So no surprise. Day 1 would be Kaizen, to understand about people and the work, and to impress upon people the importance of the need to master the basics. And day 2 would be TPS in the Toyota way. Now, if I were doing the training, I would spend both days to help people understand the current state. So before they begin to understand Kaizen and TPS in the Toyota way, that they would understand what challenges they face with the managers above them, because the question related to middle managers. And I've in the past done a lot of training, beginning with senior leaders who are very happy with the work that I've done. And they say, would you please train the vice presidents below us? Okay, yes, we'll do that. And a funny question pops up, because pretty soon into the training, they say, did our bosses get this training? I said, yeah. Because in the weeks that passed between when the most senior people were trained and the next level, they didn't see any change. And then we do the mid management, and they say the same thing. I mean, this literally is within the first half hour. They say, did our bosses go through this training? Because in the month or two that passed between when we did the first 2 levels, nothing changed. Even though they were given explicit instructions on what they need to change in terms of, how they lead and the things they say and what they do and so forth, no change. So, we've I've had difficulties, in training middle management and having that training be effective when the senior leaders don't reinforce or don't do what they're supposed to do as a result of the training. So I think it's important first to understand the current state, and I would draw upon my work in the Triumph of Classical Management and the books that followed to focus in on that. The next question is, in Nalanda tradition, even the words of Buddha said we must run, I have to move this out of the way, must run logical thinking and reasoning through learning, right and wrong. So this morning I followed the learning curve exactly to interact with Bob by borrowing a rare opportunity, etc. Must be connected to the hashtag Kaizen, or it would be misused with a huge negative impact. I also believe the main reason is Six Sigma failure. So again, as I expressed before, in my view, Kaizen over kata. I'm not saying kata is not useful. Scientific thinking is a life skill. You think in terms of humanity, Homo sapiens as a species. We survived because of our ancestors hundreds of thousands of years ago, probably longer than that, questioning things, thinking about cause and effect relationships, what causes life, what causes death, what causes disease, what causes good health, etc. This is part of the human evolutionary work. But in my experience, kata is taught within the framework of Kaizen, and Kaizen offers much more than kata. Again, not saying kata is not useful or important for certain people in certain circumstances and so forth. But what Mike Rother said recently was that, all this bad Kaizen that's being practiced, you should add kata to it, and then you'll have a better outcome. But my response to that was, why not have better Kaizen practice, and then don't need to add kata to bad Kaizen practice. Is there a way to sell? Hang on a second, I gotta to sell Kaizen. Excuse me. Is there any way to sell Kaizen the way it should have been sold to a majority of companies, as opposed to the lean tool centric way that is loved by the majority of companies today? That's from Oliver. Well, what we've learned is the reality is Kaizen is too much change for most managers, and the lean tools don't produce much change. So if you're dealing with a leadership team that wants to maintain the status quo, more or less, the status quo does not mean nothing changes. There some things change, but it's mostly the same. If they're not interested in the change that Kaizen brings about, then there really isn't any way to sell this to them. Many people who have been successful with Kaizen, many CEOs who've been successful with Kaizen, these might be familiar names, like Art Byrne and George Koenigsegg, or whoever it is, it doesn't matter. They talk to other CEOs and tell them how wonderful Kaizen is, and how important it is, and how fundamental it is, and how necessary it is to be able to compete, and so on and so on. And the other CEOs pretty much don't care, or don't care about it. So perhaps the people who are most capable, most skilled to sell Kaizen, because they've had the most experience with it. And that includes our, senseis like Mr. Iwata, who unfortunately passed in 2001, but Chihiro Nakao and many others of that caliber. These people are all great for selling it, but it still doesn't resonate with most CEOs. So Oliver, I don't think that really answers your question, but it's part of understanding what the current state is, and why is it that the leaders don't want so much of the change that Kaizen produces? How can we properly? Yep. Okay. And by the way, anybody here, we can talk offline later if you want to have a Zoom meeting one-on-one. I'm happy to do that. We can dig into some of this a little bit better. Like, for example, in Ali's case, I'm not sure I really answered the question, but that's the reality of the situation. How can we properly brand and successfully sell Kaizen that we all know can diminish or even dismantle the institution of leadership and the system of profound privilege? Will Kaizen be just another afterthought? Another one from Oliver. My view, the reason why I wrote these books, and I'll talk more about it later, which a lot of people are like, oh, it's so negative. Why do you write about negative stuff? It's to understand the current state. It's to be consistent with lean thinking. Before you start improving, understand the current state. It's actually consistent with TPS thinking. So what you want to do is understand the current state and then just try different things. You have to try storm because nobody has the answer of how do you get leaders to accept Kaizen in many more numbers of leaders than what you have today. Kaizen is just not relevant to most leaders who remain committed to classical management because it's tradition, and in their view, the tradition works, and so why change it, and so forth. So it all starts with understanding the current state and the details that are within that. Now, a lot of people will say, give these superficial reasons why leaders don't like Kaizen, they're afraid of change, just a number of superficial reasons. And the work that I've done, I'm not concerned about those superficial reasons. They've been around since the days of scientific management. Those superficial reasons that people talk about today have been around for 100 years. So what good does it do to use that as a basis for understanding the current state? It's useless. It's useless. You have to dig deeper to understand what's going on, why leaders prefer the aesthetics of classical management, why they prefer to maintain their status, rights, privileges, and so on. How this connects spiritually to them. What are the preconceptions that lead to long-term acceptance of classical management through generations of managers, generations of leaders, multiple generations? First business leaders were, kings and queens. Prior to that, it was priests. There's similar patterns throughout this long history of time. The next question. What is the trigger point which starts implementation need for leaner Kaizen? From Nitin Patil. Technical and human problems that you have in your business. The technical problems are always going to be cost, delivery, quality, lead time problems, things like that. And we know what they are. I mean, when I was a business unit manager, and it was for a U.S. government customer because we were making parts for military aircraft for the engines, and that's a very, very demanding customer. And we knew darn well what our cost, delivery, and quality problems were for both production hardware as well as developmental hardware. And we didn't need to sit there and draw a value stream map to figure out, what our problems were and so on. We also, as humans doing this work, had stress, frustration, people were blamed for problems, all these typical things that you see in classically managed businesses. And this should start the need, but too often people accept things as the way they are. Whatever is right. Remember that. And whatever is wrong. Whatever is right is the non-critical thinker who just accepts, yeah, we're late. Well, that's because it's the supplier, or that's because of this or that, the excuses. They don't see these things as abnormal conditions. They see it as the normal condition, that there's cost, delivery, quality, lead time problems, that people are unhappy, they're stressed, blaming, etc. This is what happens in classically managed business. So this is all the information you need to know that this should trigger Kaizen. How can we make Kaizen a priority during running the business? Another one from Nitin Patel. Really, the top leaders must do that. You see it, Mr. Culp at General Electric company, which is now split off into different companies. So now he's the CEO of GE Aerospace. But if you can't get the top leader to make this a priority, then what I and other people have done, many other people have done, is we do stealth Kaizen or guerrilla Kaizen. We do Kaizen without really talking much about it. We move forward to make improvements. We don't call it Kaizen. We just apply the mentality of the Kaizen way of thinking to making improvements, and use some of the Kaizen, what do I want to say? Some of the forms related to Kaizen to help us focus on the improvements that need to be made. But basically, we have to resort to a stealth Kaizen, and when we do that, we don't celebrate our successes or anything like that, because then people would know we're doing Kaizen and they would shut us down. How can small scale manufacturers, job shops start Kaizen? Well, in the old days, you hire a Kaizen consultant, and those people are still can still be very valuable. Depends who the Kaizen consultant is, or the organization that is providing Kaizen consultants. But today, I mean, when I say the old days, I mean, 35 years ago, there was not much written about this. You depended on the Kaizen consultant to teach you. But today, you can do it yourself Kaizen. There's books, videos, whatever, lots of information out there that tell you what Kaizen is and how to apply it. But you would need to, absorb that information. And of course, absorbing the information is not enough. You have to apply it, and you have to stumble and fail and succeed and so forth, and then improve it. So there's a tremendous amount of information today that's available about Kaizen. I guess I shouldn't say tremendous. There's still to this day only 2, 3, 4, 5, I think six or seven books that are really good on Kaizen. But it hasn't been, I mean, look at the volume of books about Toyota and so forth. It vastly exceeds the number of books about Kaizen, which is remarkable. It just goes to show you that it's just completely been forgotten. Not completely, but largely forgotten. Tools don't change the system. Kaizen method does. What might Kaizen look like for the lean community who are dissatisfied with lean tools, classical management, or our own inability to sooner realize progressive management? So you saw the 15 joys of Kaizen that I showed earlier. This is something that does not come across in the writing about Kaizen. I've tried to bring that in my writing about Kaizen, particularly in the book called Improvement, and other books, the Wire Mold, the Better Thinking, Better Results book, and so on. People just, when they hear about Kaizen, they tend to think of it as just another work-related activity. People have started long ago to refer to it as Kaizen projects. Of course, who needs another project at work? Everybody's got a lot of projects. Now we got another project. It's just called a different name, a Kaizen project. So all of this stuff just turns people off. They don't either see any possible joy out of it, or they participated in Kaizen that was badly facilitated, and therefore they got no joy out of it. And they weren't allowed to express their creativity in Kaizen because of the bosses said they don't want that much to change, and so on. So really, to educate people on the joys of Kaizen, the creativity that comes from Kaizen, to recognize the fun that Kaizen can be, I think could really help move things forward. But, if I'm the only one saying this, who's listening to me, right? I mean, one thing you learn about, how things gain popularity is either there's a groundswell of interest at the bottom, or there's somebody at the top who says, yeah, Kaizen's a lot of fun. It's very creative activity. There's 15 joys in Kaizen. Larry Kalpa, G, is is giving some of that message, but who else? Can you name me another CEO who's given that message roughly, sort of? Who else? So that's a big problem that people are not on board with that. Andy had this question, what do you think about my thinking about this one, the lean transformation model as the center of focus? So, Andy, you might want to say something here, but this is the images that Andy provided showing the Toyota house, which is kind of reflecting the TPS tools, not entirely because you have the philosophy at the bottom and so forth, but he's referring to this as the method side, and that the TPS management, the Toyota way, as you can see to the right, is the human side. And so, and you probably are all familiar with Toyota saying, we make people, some phrase like we make people before product. So you can see that there in Andy's slide. So you develop the human side and then and the method side, and these things are actually developed, in combination with one another. It's not totally sequential as shown there. And then on the right-hand side, he's showing that for supervisors and engineers, some of the technical aspects related to flow, and then what the leadership role is, and so forth. What you see on the right is what's the word? The Lean Enterprise Institute put out a model of lean transformation, and I edited it extensively to show what I think is a much better model of lean transformation compared to what the Lean Enterprise Institute produced. This is much more specific and actionable. Anyway, so my response to Andy is, it looks okay, but try it and see. You can't predict the outcome with accuracy. You could guess and be correct, or you could guess and be wrong, but so just try it out and see if it makes sense to people. See what happens. Question 7, what is the difference between classical management, which you talked about, and modern management, which I guess Jim Womack talks about, and how do you think about the current situation? I mean, still classical management is prevailing over lean, or any changes since agile is prevailing. So let me share with you a couple of other slides. I'll stop this share for the moment and find slide 15 and 16. Oh, where could it be? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe just hold on a second. Should have opened that one as well. Probably just a tab, but can't find it quickly. Oops, hold on a second. Yep. Share that. Let's go to slide 15. Okay, and in the meantime, I forgot what the question was, which is difference between classical management and modern management and so forth. Oh, darn it, I have to stop that share and start another one. Okay, here it is. So let's understand the origin and evolution of management systems. I'm not sure, Jim Womack refers to, I guess, classical management as modern management, but I refer to classical management as having a long history. Classical management has ancient origins. It's changed over the years, but there's still some fundamental ways of thinking and doing things that remain the same, such as blaming people. You can imagine the pharaoh, when the engineer and architect built a lousy pyramid 5,000 years ago, the pharaoh probably was blaming the architect and the engineer, because it takes a lot of the king's resources or queen's resources to make a pyramid, and you'd be quite upset. So you're going to get blamed. So this stuff goes way back. So classical management has ancient origins. It's rooted in preconceptions, which are preconceived ideas or prejudices. And yes, it changes over the years in the purple arrow a little bit, but again, those fundamentals are the same. So that's what I think Jim Womack refers to as modern management. He characterizes it as having roots in Tayloristic systems, scientific management, which is incorrect. You really have to forget about what he says about that because he has an inaccurate understanding of all that. But anyway, where did TPS and progressive management come from? The oldest engineering is military engineering. Over time, there becomes civil engineering, then mechanical engineering. Then in the late 1800s and early 1900s, you have what's called industrial management, which resulted in, actually it had the term industrial administration in the early days, but changed to industrial management, then industrial engineering. And this is where, Toyota drew some ideas out of this in the 1930s, but I put the 1950s here in the post-World War II period to really mark the starting point of the development of TPS in the Toyota way. And of course, that proceeds forward and it evolves, et cetera, over time. And from that comes lean management. But the origin of progressive management is in engineering and science, scientific method, trial and error, scientific thinking, and all that. Classical management is not. Progressive management is rooted in sensory perceptions. Engineering discipline is got an idea, make it, build it, try it out, see what happens. Fails, figure out why, try it again. That's not the origin and evolution of classical management. It's rooted in preconceptions. Progressive management is rooted in sensory perceptions. So this really is the difference fundamentally between the way organizations are managed and the way progressively managed organizations are. They're not afraid to experiment and try new things and to make substantial changes, not just to mess around with a little bit around the edges. The other slide I wanted to show you was this one. This is the anti-Kaizen heart and mind. And this is the classical management way of thinking, that humans have limitations. We don't have limitations. We're very creative. We're innovative. They think we must support and defend the status quo. But that's what the leaders think, that they must support and defend the status quo. They must repress enthusiasm. Trial and error is not a plan. Well, what is Kaizen if not trial and error? You see at the bottom, it says avoid abstract schemes. What is Kaizen if not an abstract scheme? This is why leaders don't like Kaizen. This is why they like tools. Respect traditions. Well, Kaizen disrespects traditions because it says whatever is wrong. Logic is slow and laborious. Well, logic is fundamental to the practice of Kaizen. Business is fundamentally illogical. You'll notice that some leaders fail completely and yet they receive multi-million-dollar pay. That's illogical, right? Reason ignores real-world constraints. It works, don't experiment. Scientific thinking is hazardous. Continuous change destabilizes. Well, how did Toyota go from being nothing after World War II to 25 years later, being on the, and I date that like 1950 because it sort of took 5 years just to recover from World War II. By 1975, they're on the world stage, and they've developed this famous TPS system. Continuous change. And then you look at the heart. Imagination disappoints. So you don't want people dreaming about how much better a process could be, how much better people could be healthier, how much happier they could be at work. Forget about all that. Don't dream about that. Don't think anything that's possible. Just keep doing things the way we're doing because the alternatives are worse. The way you run a business with your gut, instinct, and intuition, that's much more useful than facts. Facts are inconvenient. They mess up what we want to do as leaders. They like conflict and competition. They have the attitude whatever is right. Control things hierarchically. Make sure nobody goes off course. You have to revere institutions. The past is with us today because it has value. It worked in the past, so it works now. So we have to revere that and keep using it. So this is the mentality that says no to Kaizen. It's remarkable that that is, what we have to deal with. So question 8, if someone cannot acquire the skills of an industrial engineer, does it preclude that individual from practicing lean/continuous improvement with others? No, most of Ono's guys were not industrial engineers. Some were mechanical engineers, but they essentially became industrial engineers through daily practice. And they did a really remarkable thing because they took the work that came out of scientific management, which ended up being industrial engineering, and Toyota people found ways, important and significant ways, to improve that, to create Toyota-style industrial engineering, which is remarkable, what they did and how useful that is, and also how little people know about it, except, of course, unless you you'll see Monday through Thursday, the training from the Kaizen Institute and from Shingijutsu that gives you a window into Toyota-style IE. And that type of IE welcomes people from any background. Fujio Cho was trained in law. Many people have business degrees that are proficient practitioners of Toyota-style IE. So it's very welcoming to anybody of any background. I have a bunch of engineering degrees, but my background really is metallurgy. So let's see. This next question. Kaizen is translated as change for the better by Shingijutsu. My question is, what is the operational definition of Kaizen? How do you define Kaizen? Is the answer in the following quote. I think you're referring to an article that I wrote, Kaizen Evolution, but this didn't help to define it. It mentions one has to learn Kaizen, et cetera, et cetera. How about this? You can think of Kaizen as trial and error to achieve something better. I mean, literally, it translates, well, I'm not going to say literally. Reiko can, and Dave can certainly provide much more better understanding of the characters and what they mean and so forth. But generally, people translate it as change for the better. And that, what does change mean? Well, the idea fundamentally is that you're engaging in trial and error to produce a better situation, or you're engaging in trial and error in our context of our conversation here to achieve a flow of material and information. But in doing so, you're developing people and improving the workplace so it's less of a struggle. So again, I don't know if that answers your question, but it's trying to sort of peel back the onion to get a little bit better understanding of what we're trying to do with Kaizen. In slide 2, that was early on in what we were talking about, I mentioned, it said your company management system in place of your company production system. In that particular slide, I was simply trying to maintain the analogy of your company production system becoming your company management system as you develop it. Question 9, I thought Kaizen was about making small incremental changes. How does Kaizen make discovery and large gains? Is this connected to Kaikaku, radical change? By what methods can we help people focus on Kaizen instead of lean tools? So yeah, Kaizen can produce very large gains. And Kaikaku, of course, can be a separate activity when the team is specifically tasked to search for a big breakthrough. But many people refer to going from batch and queue processing to flow, that kind of Kaizen as having been Kaikaku. So there's some, I think, confusion in terminology and how people characterize this. But what we want to do is have people use these tools within the context of Kaizen, not separate from that context. And I've seen just enormous breakthroughs as a result of Kaizen when people were not specifically challenged to create the big breakthrough. They were challenged with improving a process, but in doing that, they did much more than that. They created a large breakthrough. What are creative recommendations to support Kaizen in the most immature of environments, brownfields, businesses that have been around a long time? I don't think people put enough attention into making Kaizen a little bit like a party. It's not a party. You're in the workplace, you're trying to improve work, but there's nothing that says you can't have a lot of fun doing this. And if you think about if you throw a party with your friends in your private life, and if the party is not good, next time you have an invitation, people won't show up to the party. But if your party is fun, the next time you give people an invitation, they will happily come to the party. So if you make a Kaizen a little bit like a party, and there needs to be some changes, by the way, in how Kaizen is presented to people. So let me briefly explain. In most cases, people are selected for a Kaizen team. They've never been in Kaizen. They're just told to show up at a certain place at a certain time and participate in Kaizen. And that's no good. You need to prepare people for Kaizen and tell them what they're going to be engaged with, what the point of Kaizen is, what you're trying to learn as a result of your participation from Kaizen to practice after you're done with Kaizen and go back to your regular job and so forth. And there needs to be something on the back end as well. But part of that reframing of Kaizen is we're here to have a good time, to express our creativity, to come up with ideas for improvement. And to tell people that, the old way of doing things is you had an idea, you told the boss, and the boss said, forget about it, just do your job. So we're trying to get away from that here with Kaizen. In Puerto Rico, we have something called a parranda. It's around Christmas time where people just show up at your house at midnight to party. And you better be prepared with things in your house, food and drink and so forth, to handle that party of people just showing up. So we can make Kaizen a little bit like parranda. Although organizations understand Kaizen to be a continuous, eternal state of mind, why do so many act as if it's a sequence of projects? This is due to the long-established habit of classical management spilling over into progressive management and wanting to control Kaizen. I said earlier, Kaizen projects. Classical management, those habits, those ways of thinking are so deeply rooted in people's heads in companies that when Kaizen comes into it, they immediately deconstruct it. They change it so that it's basically worthless. They turn it into projects. They don't put in the time and effort to understand it. There's the assumption that this thing will fit in, plug and play, fit in automatically to their classical management world, and it doesn't. In your experience, what's the biggest barrier in the thinking of our Western business culture to accept the Kaizen mindset? Well, it's the preconceptions that inform classical management. And those preconceptions are in a number of categories, as you can see: economic, social, political, historical, etc. And within each category, there's 10 or 12 preconceptions. That's why when people go to the boss and say, we should do this lean stuff, boss, look at all the great things in terms of, cost reduction and market share and developing people and so forth. When you give those kind of presentations, that only addresses a handful, 6 out of maybe the 100 or so, 120 or so preconceptions that leaders have. In other words, it's not a good argument. It hasn't addressed all their concerns. Plus, why do they want to give up classical management? It maximizes their status, rights, privileges, wealth, and power. There's plenty of ways to make money without Kaizen. the CEO playbook has 25 things that they can do within the world of classical management to increase profits, increase market share, whatever it is. And so most of the arguments put forth to convincing leaders to adopt lean management are ineffective because of that. Why do so many organizations roll out Kaizen as the thing to do rather than as a mindset to internalize? From Patrick Ross in Australia. Again, it's the habit of classical management to think a certain way. And we are heavily influenced by people who are higher in status. So you may remember years ago, CEOs would always talk about maximizing shareholder value. And people down at the bottom of the company would go, yeah, that's what we're here to do, is maximize shareholder value. Whatever is right. That's what they accept. The CEO said something and then whatever is right. Do they bother to check? Is there a legal requirement to maximize shareholder value? Is it an internal policy? Where did this come from? But people just believe it. They don't ask any questions. So, but it's because it came from the CEO that they believe it. So it is the habit to just follow what the boss says and not ask questions. They don't have the viewpoint, whatever is wrong. The classical management people are not trained to ask questions. It's, whatever is right, just do what the boss tells you to do. They don't understand the humanist and philosophical underpinnings of Kaizen. They absorb it into classical management and just see it as another activity to do. They don't want to learn what the true meaning of Kaizen is. And if they did, that messes up the status quo. And they don't want that. They want to maintain the status quo. Why we always talk about Kaizen and rarely about Kaku? Yeah, I think I answered that before. I think that particular person, again, was talking about this big change from batch and queue to flow. Why do you think the order is Kaizen to TPS to the Toyota way? Let's see, because there's challenge, Genshi, Genbutsu, respect, and teamwork are all practiced for / steering the development of TPS. I view the Toyota way as an after-the-fact construction based upon how TPS was created, especially in the documented, formalized form. Of course, when TPS was created, the Kaizen method over time had to produce or create the need for challenge, Genshi, Genbutsu, respect, and teamwork. And these things are needed to create TPS, but the vehicle for its creation was Kaizen. So in other words, if you did Kaizen, if you practice Kaizen, you would see the need for challenge, Genshi, Genbutsu, respect, and teamwork. Not right away. You'd have to practice it and discover these things as you go. Now we see them right away since it seems obvious. Because now it's all been documented and it seems clear to us.